All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. And a special thank you to Sarah, Rachel, and Tamim for being here. Um, this evening, we are talking about Jewish books and the Jewish book industrial complex and how we are going to work together to challenge it in the same ways that we're challenging so many other things and why. Unfortunately for everyone, Chin Julie isn't able to be here this evening. We were all looking forward to being in this with her, but we still have these amazing folks, Sarah, Rachel, and Tamim, to tell us about their books, their work in the book industry, and the letter that they wrote. So I'm not going to bother trying to introduce any of you because you will do a better job introducing yourselves. So who would like, well, Sarah, you're already unmuted, so I'm going to have you go first.
Oh, but I think Tamim or Rachel should go first because they were involved in writing the letter.
Okay. Um, Rachel, do you want to go first?
Totally. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Edelman, she, her, and they, them. I am the author of Dear Memphis. I'm a poet. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and my work in Dear Memphis and elsewhere is very concerned with diaspora, with the ways in which we move through it as a people and as individuals. My family lived in Memphis for 5 generations, and we are no longer there. And so this both sense of belonging and alienation within our diasporic homes uh, is a really important movement for me to track and to follow. Um, I I really think a lot about the ways in which like white supremacy and Christian hegemony dovetail in Southern Jewish experience and in Jewish experience writ large, and um, that's really shaped my politics, which brought me into community with these lovely folks. Tamim and I met at AWP, which is a writing conference in 2024. Our books came out in the same month. Both of us debuted in February of 2024. And as a debut author, there's a lot going on. And one of those things that was going on was invitations to submit books to the Jewish Book Council's prizes. And at that point, I had been organizing in solidarity with Palestine for about 10 years, and had been really involved deeply in Jewish Voice for Peace's organizing against the ongoing genocide that had started just months before. So I was really disturbed by the Jewish Book Council's positioning of itself as so forcefully pro-Israel. And so even though I am this debut author and I'm so excited to get attention, I could not in good conscience submit Dear Memphis to the Jewish Book Council's awards. But that thinking, that discussion brought me into community with Tamim and Emma Copley Eisenberg and Chan Julie Wang and like so many other writers with whom we began this dialogue that turned into a letter, that turned into a conversation that's now growing. And I'm grateful to be here. Thank you, Andy, for hosting us.
The context to meme. Do you want to pick up the story and share your own?
Sure. And I'll apologize for my allergies. I don't know if where all of you are is as allergic as it is in Brooklyn, but if I sneeze, that's why. I am delighted to be here. Like Rachel said, my debut novel, City of Laughter, came out in January 2024. And it's a deeply, like all my work, it's deeply Jewish. My background is modern Orthodox Jewish. Grew up in a deeply Zionist and modern Orthodox Jewish household. And so my work is really rooted in the love I continue to have for like traditional Judaism and like Jewish mysticism and kind of the deep cuts of traditional Judaism. And also queerness, I think, is really central to my work. Generational sort of inheritance of all kinds, and folklore. And for me, realizing I was queer and non-binary were really essential, like many, many years ago, to my beginning to question other things politically, very much including my, kind of interrogating my Zionism and eventually becoming, starting to work in solidarity with Jews working for Palestine and with Palestinians, and then eventually like starting to identify as an anti-Zionist. Back in the day in New York, I was working with an organization called Jews Against the Occupation, and it really formed my political identity. So while City of Laughter is not a book about any of those things, it's a book that kind of reaches, I call it a speculative queer history, and it reaches into my family's past in a very kind of liberally interpreted way, that imagines a sort of queer lineage. And it's a celebration too of diaspora. It's about, my great-grandparents shtetl in Poland, and I really wanted to write a Jewish book that was about diasporic Judaism. And so it was meaningful while I was touring on that book to talk about the idea of diaspora and how powerful it was and is to me, and how powerful it is to, sort of watch diasporic Judaism rise up in solidarity with Palestine, in a way that I've never seen before. And all of this is why I, came together with some folks to write this letter to the Jewish Book Council. But, probably like others who helped draft the letter, and like Rachel was talking about, my work is so flamingly Jewish. I was like, great, like I'm gonna be out there. I'm gonna talk to synagogues. I'm gonna talk to, Jewish organizations. And really in the wake of October 7th, in the wake of seeing deeply, how deeply organizations like the Jewish Book Council dug their heels into their pro-Israel centrism and Zionism, I felt I couldn't do that. I felt very, I felt sad, I felt angry, and I felt like we had to really have a different conversation. There were so many of us negotiating the kinds of things Rachel was talking about, of like being invited to things. Should I do this? Is it worth getting in the room at this conservative institution so that I can bring my perspective in there? Or can I not stomach even going inside? So, lots of questions, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I was very, very grateful to connect with these other writers. And I think what we've built has begun to evolve, and it's really heartening.
Great. And I have so many questions just for you two, but I can't wait to hear it from Sarah as well.
Okay, so my debut novel, Unfinished Acts of Wild Creation, came out just a little bit over a year ago in May 2025. It's about 3 generations of women in the Rosenberg family with an inherited genetic illness, a terminal genetic illness, and the different ways they make meaning in the face of mortality. But it's not a twee carpe diem book. These are messy, complicated, argumentative, difficult, neurotic, honest people. And it's about sort of their authentic conversations as they attempt to figure out how to live a substantive life. It is a very Jewish book, in that, and it sort of celebrates, at the time that I was writing it, I thought of it as Yiddishkeit. It sort of celebrates a particular type of irreverent outsiderness and sort of revels in outsiderness, and sort of thinks about Jewishness as a category of marginality. But I actually hadn't really thought of it as a particularly Jewish book. I thought I was intervening in conversations about motherhood and disability and death, dignity, and grief. But you release a Jewish book in the middle of a genocide, and suddenly you're in the middle of you're a public Jew, and you're in the middle of a conversation about Jewishness. And so I found myself very isolated because, I had my like leftist Jewish friends and I had my literary friends, but I didn't have my literary leftist Jewish friends, right? And so I was attempting to navigate this, and I found myself, much to my surprise and distress, embraced by the mainstream Jewish literary establishment. It is a book about Jewish mothers and daughters, and what do Jews love but complicated mother-daughter relationships. And so I I found the politics, and I've talked to Tamim a tiny bit about this, the politics of the Jewish Book Council not immediately transparent to me. I didn't know anything about it. I was sort of submitted to the National Jewish Book Award by my publisher. And then I became a finalist this year and started immersing myself in the organization. At the same time that I got an email announcing that I was a finalist, they announced that their gala was going to be hosted by Jonah Platt, who's a virulently pro-Israel podcaster. And I stopped sleeping. I was like, I can't, what do I do? If I win, I can't go to this award. So I went to the Jewish Left Conference, where I heard Dov Kent and Ariel Angel speak. And I was like, hey, wait a second, like, we need new Jewish institutions, put out some feelers, and ended up getting connected to this group. So I came late after the letter had already been written, but I'm thrilled to be here. And sort of because I sort of came to this as an outsider, I was like, hey, let's start a new thing. And so that's been sort of my role.
Thank you. I had no idea that. I didn't know that part of your story. I didn't know that it was the like Jonah Platt piece that revealed what Jewish Book Council is.
I mean, there were some other components. I mean, like it wasn't, because part of the thing with the Jewish Book Council was they moved dramatically to the right, like so many of these other organizations after October 7th. But if you look at the history of books that have been honored, they include many of the signatories of this letter, right? So when you actually look at the people who've been honored, you're like, Muriel Rothman-Zecker, one of the writers of this letter, was honored. The Safekeep won last year, right? So it's very hard to figure out, but then you start being like, what? This anti-Semitism? Wait, this anti-Semitism count? Hold on a second. And then the thing that pushed me over the edge also was that there were these marketing grants that they were promoting with the Maimonides Fund, which is an explicitly Zionist organization, and they were giving out $30,000 to people whose books they approved of. You had to submit, and they also reserved the right to take the money back at the end if they didn't approve of the final product. And I was like, oh, they're investing in promulgating Zionist Jewish stories. And so that was another moment. Yeah.
I think a whole bunch of the money from the Maimonides Fund literally comes from the Israeli government. Like, it's not just like American Jewish donors. It actually comes directly from the government. Yeah.
And there is another program with the JBC that we didn't particularly call out in the letter, but that gave me real pause when I was thinking about engaging with them, which is called the Israel Bookshelf, which is like a free books program to organizations to specifically it's a Hubspara program. It's built to create pro-Israel propaganda.
And then get it
even
in
though
everybody's house.
Right. And that is something that's like lower down listed on their website. So like many institutions, they don't wear the politics, or they didn't prior to the current genocide. They in the past have not worn those politics as transparently.
So, I mean, there's so many different ways to respond to this realization when you come to it in any Jewish institution. I spent a very long time working in like big mainstream Jewish institutions until I realized that I didn't think that the change I wanted to make was actually possible. And there are other people who are still trying to do that work, and I think that both are valid approaches. And I'm wondering, like, the way that the letter is framed is that you're trying to get the Jewish Book Council to make change within itself. And I'd love to hear about your thinking with that. Like, do you see any kind of possibility of that actually occurring? Do you have hope? And yeah, where do you see this moving?
I think it's a question that so many of us are wrestling with. This question of like, approaching and pushing our existing institutions versus starting new ones. And I've believed, and I think I continue to believe that like there's room and importance in doing both. Um, I think approaching the JBC, we actually approached them first with a closed letter. So we didn't even publish the letter to begin with. We thought we would approach them in good faith, send them a letter directly, and see what would happen. I will say, like, partially, I think this was strategic. Like, I think it's good to start, no matter what the conversation is, there's a lot to be said for, approaching someone directly and just seeing what happens. But, we weren't and aren't naive. And like a lot of us know people who have in the past attempted to have this conversation with the Jewish Book Council. This isn't a brand new conversation with them. We're not the first people to criticize them, and we certainly won't be the last. And I think it just made sense to me and to the folks who started this process to try to see what happens and to also just be able to say like, we started this it really in good faith. The JBC's history is one of social justice, and even if they've moved away from that, like that is in their, in sort of their roots. So I think, especially as someone who has Zionist family members, people in my life for whom like I'm the anti-Zionist in the room, my thinking was like, let's just be other anti-Zionists in the room and non-Zionists in the room and see whether anything different happens. And it didn't. But that's what it was about for me. It's just like, trying that first and knowing that we had sort of tried it when we went more public.
Yeah, I totally agree, Tamim, that like this was a strategy that we saw as honoring also relationships that people among the authors of this letter had and continue to have with people at JBC, with staff. There are signatories of the letter, uh, as Sarah said, who've been honored with the awards. There are signatories of the letter who have been published in their literary magazine, who have worked with people on their staff. And those are real relationships. And we wanted to treat those people with respect, and with trust to a degree. I also think that like the process that we went through with them, it was an extended process for a reason. We sent the letter. We received some replies. We ended up scheduling a Zoom meeting that they even hired a mediator for, which was we thought a good sign. And we had that meeting. We came out of it um, with clear action items and that we requested of them, that we as a collective requested. And then we didn't hear from them for a very long time. And when we did, it was very little. It wasn't addressing the concerns that we had asked to be addressed. But during that time, the Jewish Book Council also had this online Jewish Books Conference, and a fellow signatory of the letter asked me to join her on a panel for that. So we did a panel on Southern Jewish conflict in community, like a Southern as a Southern Jewish community as like a guide to navigating conflict in community, hoping that this might offer like a window into the possibilities of what Jewish authors could offer to this moment. Because quite frankly, we have a lot to offer and we want to be in community. That ended up, it happened and it was lovely and we got no feedback nor any follow-up about it. My like pipe dream for it was that would happen and they would go, oh, it's not so scary. and they would respond to our action item of hosting an event, either online or live in New York City, of non and anti-Zionist Jewish authors. They'd already done it once, they could do it again. But that turned out not to be the case. And so to me, it ended up being inevitable, but it was sad to publish the open letter because it meant that that inside strategy had failed.
And is that the general feeling all three of you have, that the strategy for making change is like kind of over now? Or not, like within the JBC in particular, I mean.
I guess like it's failed. Maybe it's stalled out. Maybe failed is the wrong phrasing. It could still potentially move, perhaps, but I don't see any movement. We've seen no movement throughout this process. I don't know. What do y'all think?
I mean, again, I'm late to this party, right? But what I saw this year, again, Jonah Platt, the Maimonides Fund, is people who are digging in their heels and circling the wagons. And I don't see any movement away from right-wing Zionism. Yeah. Well, I have some other thoughts, but for later.
Yeah, I was just going to add, like, I think we started a conversation that didn't really go anywhere with the JBC, but it really has been fruitful for the authors. And you know, we were just sort of an ad hoc email list, and we keep growing and growing and growing, and it's really cool. And I think, you know, we have been responsive. Like, it's been kind of a live conversation. We've been sort of responsive to, you know, what's happening, or what, you know, what, as it turned out, like mostly wasn't happening. So like, look, if somebody, you know, if the JBC changes its tune at any point, like, personally, like, I'm, you know, I'll be responsive to that. Like, I think like it's a conversation, like we're in a moment where like levers of change matter in so many different ways and in so many different places. So if ever there's an opening for this conversation, that's great. But right now it seems, you know, like Sarah just said, very clear that like it's, you know, things are only getting more and more rigid in the sort of like digging their heels in kind of direction of things.
So sounds like you've started organizing people, and people are kind of even organizing themselves to a certain degree. Where are you headed with that?
So I feel the need to say that we're in the earliest of stages here, right? So what we're doing is we're sort of building up to have a retreat this summer where we're going to kind of hammer out all of the basic issues, like what are our mission statements, what isn't our mission statements. But sort of the approach that I've been taking is that what legacy Jewish institutions are so good at doing is generating fear and scarcity, right? And playing upon fear and scarcity, and then providing themselves as the only solution, right? And the Jewish Book Council has done a very good job of saying, nobody wants our stories, you need us, right? We have these grants, we're hiring someone to interface with publishing, and like hammering in the idea that nobody's interested in Jewish stories, and so you need to work with the Jewish Book Council or you're never going to get published, right? They're like really stoking up fear. And so throughout the conversations that I've been having, we're like, well, what does the Jewish Book Council actually do? It's not that, you know, the award is $500, it's connections and networks, but a lot of it is pay to play. There's a lot of barriers to entry. Hold on a second. We have these enormous, I mean, this email list is growing and growing every week with more and more people on it. I mean, and so we have all of these networks and connections that we can share. And I think this goes to this larger question, which is as we create these new Jewish institutions, we can push back against all of these, you know, classist, capitalist, racist, all of these like forms of hegemony that we want to push back on. So publishing really functions through narratives of scarcity, and people hoard and don't share resources. So we can be an organization that shares resources, right? So that's something we've talked about doing, and push back against this narrative of scarcity, and maybe really talk about abundance. And so we're talking about kicking it off with a book festival, a Joe Kite book festival and party, and then maybe hopefully this year in 2026, and then 2027 starting our own book award, which again is not actually a huge barrier to entry. And then I have some other ideas of other things that we could do to sort of build community. I mean, the other question is, how can we be relevant to the larger literary conversation in general? And the Jewish Book Council is certainly not, as the type of Zionism that, well, as Zionism in general becomes farther and farther removed from the conversations that are happening in literature at large, right? So how can we engage ourselves productively in conversations with other diasporist peoples? And what does that mean? And what will that look like? It's actually really exciting. I've been thinking a lot about just how Molly Crabapple's book has taken off, because there's this enormous hunger for alternate Jewish narratives, because there's this crisis of meaning. And reading her book, and then watching the way people are meeting for these like old school style Marxist reading groups, right? The Marxist reading group, the like study group as a unit that can be deployed as part of the Diasporist Book Collaborative. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm talking really fast, but I have a lot of ideas. I'm excited about it.
What's funny about like thinking of the Marxist book collective as a particular form that the Jewish book collective could take on is that it's just a form of the Torah study group, right? Like it's the same kind of thing, which is great. And yeah, I mean, I think what I am seeing right now, I mean, her book tour just ended like last week or something, but the widespread interest beyond even just the like quote unquote Jewish left that she was able to capture, because so many people, like even non-Jews, are so confused about what's going on with us, right? And one of the things you said that really stuck out to me, Sarah, that I just want to lift up is this idea that one of the greatest weaknesses in these legacy organizations that are doubling down on Zionism is that doubling down is a doubling down on insularity in a world that is quickly moving away from insularity in all kinds of ways. Um, of course, we've got in governments all over, but culturally from the base, like people are not interested in that kind of insularity anymore. People are very interested in sharing culture, being a part of each other's cultures, learning about difference, and it is a huge strength of what you all are doing. Um, Uh, did either you, Rachel or Tim, did you want to talk about what your visions at all for what this Jewish diasporic book collective could be?
I I'm just excited. I'm really heartened, um, both by the conversation that has started, about the the Jewish Diasporic Book Collective, but like there are, diasporist and non and anti-Zionist Jewish organizations cropping up like more and more, very much including the one we're all sitting in right now. And so I just feel like I feel excited about that. Because, I do know many people who have been alienated from Jewish community, Jewish institutional life, synagogue life. Um, and, even as someone who was not deeply super involved in synagogue life, like, it's really exciting that I think in the coming months and years, we're going to start to really see these spaces grow and flourish. And I mean, I think like I said earlier, I think so many people are having these conversations, but there's something about when you start to constellate with others. Emma Copley Eisenberg and I we were just like texting back in the day, back and forth about like, should I do this Jewish book event? Should I do this event? What do you think? And then like, yeah, we started talking to Rachel and Chanjuli, and like like you start to realize like everybody's on their little group chats being like, what should we do? How does it work? How do we have integrity? And like, what a joy to just be like, oh, why don't we all just come together in a room and dream about like what's possible? I think about the phrase radical imagination, like sometimes it seems abstract, but like when you're talking about like, well, let's just start our own, like that really is a space for radical imagination. And like, also just thinking about, yes, we want Jewish radical organizations, but part of what's so heartbreaking about the JBC, for example, is like the centering of Jewishness, right? Like, of course, of course, it's important to center, it's a Jewish book organization, like to center Jewish narratives. But, in a moment when genocide is being committed in the purported name of Jewish safety, um, it has felt really bad, that their response has been, well, anti-Semitism, well, we're in danger. And I think something I dream of is, an organization that is both about Jewish literature and storytelling, but also about like Jewish responsibility, accountability, and like solidarity with other, with Palestinians and with other communities.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Rachel.
I just have a big yes to what Tamim just said and what Sarah said. It's been really wonderful. I feel so buoyed by the energy of my fellow authors and and artists and communities that are gathering and making, and by our creativity. The fact that like we're not necessarily beholden to the same structures, to the same like institutional foundations. We can do it differently. We can be a little more punk about it. We can be a little bit more DIY in the way that we build things. And then perhaps whatever we build can be a little more adaptable, can be a little bit more responsive, can be a little bit more democratic. Maybe. Um, maybe.
I mean, it's also fascinating to hear you all talking about this. Well, I'm part of the group of people trying to really get the Jewish diaspora movement off the ground. And obviously, when you all are ready, the book collective should join, and you could be ready right now. So like maybe just join. But it is the way that you're articulating what it means to not make Judaism a thing that is somehow inherently anti-democratic or misogynistic or racist or anti-Palestinian. Like that's not necessarily there. And there is this sense that the Jewish, especially in the American world, where Judaism has been so much about the institutions for so long, for centuries now, that those institutions and their commitments to some of those hegemonic ideals are actually in large part because they're American institutions, not necessarily because they're Jewish institutions, and a very particular kind of American institution. And to be imagining what it would be like to build containers for Judaisms in America that aren't beholden to those structures and aren't beholden to this ideal of proximity to power at any cost. It is like it's exciting. And it's really incredible to hear that like you have this whole group of amazing people who like write books, which is wild. Like it's a hard thing to do. That are committed to this future as well is it's just really exciting. And that like those you all and those folks aren't even in the rooms that I'm in building this stuff elsewhere. So this is happening all over the place. It's very exciting. And soon we will all be in rooms together, God willing. But yeah, it's just very exciting. Um, so as you have um, your names are out there now, right? Like you wrote an open letter. Um, have you been having to like field any pushback or conflict beyond just like the one that you have chosen to enter in? And if so, how are you dealing with that?
Well, I think that those of us who already had some notoriety in the literary world have had to bear the brunt of that. Um, and also like members of our community of our signatories of our open letter who are people of color have also had to bear the brunt of that. Like the non-white passing members of our group have been sorry, end of the teaching day, my words kind of go, but have been disproportionately targeted with that backlash. So that's something I've noticed. Like certainly there are the typical hateful messages on social media and things, and the press about it has been mixed. Um, it's been, I think, most interesting to see, like, since the letter went public, the Jewish Book Council's response, their purported, like, shocked response, though they've been in conversation with us for more than a year. And to wonder, like, what did they think would happen? Did they think that we would keep quiet? Because we're writers, that's not really something that we do. And we're Jewish writers. So we really like we're gonna talk about this. And like we talk about this all the time. We've talked about this so many times amongst ourselves and in anti-Zionist spaces. We talk about a lot the fact that as Jews we are so well trained in conflict that like having intra-communal conflict is something that we know how to do on everything except Israel. And so and I would argue maybe a little bit about wealth inequality. Um, that might be an American thing again. So the fact that like the Jewish Book Council itself has put out statements saying like how disheartened they are that we published this letter, I, it's puzzling. And other backlash is at this point expected and sad.
Sarah, to meme anything?
I mean, again, I signed the letter, but I came in sort of later in the process. For me, it's just been more, I like my like literary career, such as it is, just really launched a year ago. And I guess for me, it was like, hey, like in fairy tales where you like wish for something and then like it ends up being terrible. And in the fairy tale, they're like, be careful what you wish for. I felt like that's what it was like about being a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. You know what I mean? Like little kid Sarah was like, yay. And then grown up Sarah was like, this is terrible, like this is be careful what you wish for. So, with that come a lot of opportunities that I had to turn down. So it was, opportunities for readers that I lost, right? Which also made me again say, wait, hold on. We're a community of readers, right? Let's utilize our communal networks instead of feeling like taking having an anti-Zionist ethical position is a loss. It doesn't have to be at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you've both said. I think the biases, the racism, the kind of virulent Zionism, um, that is there now was always there, and I think a lot of us have practice with kind of dealing with it, ignoring it. So yeah, it's very sadly not surprising when it has come. Um, yeah. So I yeah, mostly agree with Rachel and Sarah.
has it impacted your relationship with like publishers or agents or like anything like that? Or
I mean, for me, like I'm on a small press and it's an indie press, and my publishers have been, it's honestly brought me closer to my publishers, because I've had to have these conversations with them when they say, hey, we got this invitation. Seems like it might not be in line with your moral, values. And so we've gotten to have those conversations, and I was able to get my publisher to sign on to PACB, the Palestinian boycott of Israeli goods. And again, this is a small press and an indie press, and it's something.
Yeah, I'm also very lucky that my publisher, Grove Atlantic, who is also the home for LitHub, which is like such an incredible resource, and they're the ones who published our letter. They have been incredibly supportive, incredibly, sort of like consultative. They've asked me about sort of kind of murky questions about, whether I might want to do a thing or not do a thing. And my agent also just really, really supportive, and very values aligned, which is lucky because I know so many writers who do not have that same situation, who sort of learned in the wake of October 7th, especially, that they did not share these values with either their editors or their agents. So I think that's another thing that, some people I know have had to deal with. Sort of what do you do then?
And that's again where I see this new organization with its resource sharing, helping people out who are in that situation. So I also published with a small press, whose values aligned, and my agent is wonderful. And again, this is inside baseball. People who are not involved in the politics of the Jewish Book Council are sort of like, so my agent is just kind of like, you do you. I don't know. So, knock wood. I mean, I think I'm going to go out on submission for my second book in the fall, and we'll see. But I also see the tide really changing in publishing in general right now, and moving away from Zionism, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I sort of see the culture industry in general shifting away from a sort of pro-Israel stance. So, I don't know.
I mean, I think it's happened. Like polling is showing that it's in all aspects of culture. It's just a matter of like how long it takes for that groundswell to affect what is the like kind of overarching the people who aren't moving are the ones that have their hands on the most power in society. Which sound now that I said it sounds like a weird anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. That's not what I mean. It's just it's more of a Marxist theory than an anti-Semitic one. Um, So for those who are here and watching, but not yet participating in the conversation, we are shortly going to move to Q&A. The way that'll work is that if you want to ask a question, you are going to, if I can figure out how to make it possible, you are going to turn your video on. And then I will ask you to unmute. And then you will ask your question. And the like big, bold, underline, all caps question, which means something that ends with a question mark rather than a series of statements. Please. And if you would rather ask your question in the chat, you are free to do that as well, and we will field those. But as we head into that point and people can kind of gather themselves and think about what they want to ask, I wonder for each of you, who are your, I mean, they can be Jewish, they can be not Jewish, but the kind of the anti-Zionist or political writers that have inspired you to be the people you are now and that are whose words are with you as you both write the things you write and take the actions you're taking. I'll share mine, and then you can choose, which is Jordy Rosenberg is just my favorite living author, I think. His book, I can't remember, Confessions of the Fox, something like that. Yeah, like was a life-changing book for me. And then I just read his most recent book as well, which is like I've never read anything like it. It's incredible. He's an incredible author.
Andy, that's right at the top of my list as well. His book, Night Night Fawn, his new novel, is just incredible. Just an incredible satirical, just gorgeous anti-Zionist piece of writing. I also wanted to mention the writer, essayist, poet Melanie K. Kantrowitz, from whom I first learned the word diasporism, otherwise known as Doikite, which I have on my little necklace here. And I actually got to be a part of creating this like deck of ancestors for a Judaism beyond Zionism that was designed for use on Sukkot, the holiday of Sukkot, and it's called Dwell in Revolution. You can get that on Pushcart Judaica. I'm not so much plugging that. I mean, I'm plugging it, but like I think, it was cool because I got to write about Melanie for that. So she's an important one, but I think Jordy is one of my favorite contemporary anti-Zionist Jewish novelists.
Well, I'll come in with the poets. So the poet Irena Klepfis is a wonderful English and Yiddish language poet who embodies like the queer anti-Zionist revolutionary that we all need. She has been writing across language for way longer than the Yiddish revival has existed. And she has been so committed she was born in the Warsaw Ghetto, and she has lived her whole life committed to the diasporism, to the solidarity that I can, that like is my guiding light. Um, she in like 1990 she showed up at the Yiddish Book Center's conference, and she read a poem in English and Yiddish about the desecration of Palestine, and everybody was shocked. Oh, and she kept saying she kept saying lesbianke, which is lesbian in of Yiddish, and she embodies this like moral center that I strive for, that I think about all the time, and that exists in language. So she's one, and then because Tamim did two, I'm gonna do two. The wonderful poet Lina Khalaf Tufaha, who won the National Book Award for Poetry in 2025 for her book Something About Living. A Palestinian poet, a brilliant, brilliant thinker and translator whose work teaches me how to love.
I'm going to go back to a classic and just say Grace Paley. As somebody who wrote my first novel while nursing in the midst of postpartum depression, I constantly think about Grace Paley's, characters figuring out how to participate in radical action while making dinner, changing diapers, writing protest signs, and this like constant mixture of the personal and the political, and also in terms of this idea of a sort of new radical imaginary, her sort of like no nonsense magical realism that enables the world as it is to become strange. I don't know, I go back to her again and again.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing those names. All right, folks. Anyone who is here live with us is now welcome to come off mute or come off camera and I'll let you unmute or ask a question in the chat. Please.
Hi, my name is
Hi, Jordan.
Jordan. Thank you so much for hosting this important conversation. I'm actually one of the editors of Der Spectre, which is kind of a newer publication for Bundist ideas. And I just wanted to say, like, we would love to serve as a platform for you all and like figure out ways to collaborate. But also, I wanted to ask, it's been almost like impressive to me that the Jewish Book Council has not made any mention of Molly Crabapple's book, which is like undoubtedly the biggest Jewish book release of this year. It's hard for me not to see that as like intentional in some way. So I'm curious if like um, perhaps following the release of the letter, like if other writers have experienced almost a kind of like blacklisting from JBC and perhaps other institutions. I mean, of course, this has happened across other institutions as well, but like it is just really kind of appalling to me that they've just completely ignored her book, not even to give it a bad review.
Yeah, did you see it was even in The Economist?
Mhm.
Like, they even acknowledged the book. I think it's fascinating that like the commitment to turning away from, yeah, the I was thinking like it's probably the biggest Jewish book of maybe the last 5 years, but I don't have the numbers, so I don't know. Um, and I know that like that there are authors who've had difficulty in navigating like synagogue appearances and things like that, and particularly like the interpersonal dynamics of those. Um, I can say just briefly, I went back to my childhood synagogue in Memphis, Tennessee, for on book tour, and prior to that, I had like reached out to some folks who were in solidarity with Palestine and who were in that community, but couldn't be open. They were like in the closet about their anti-Zionism, and I'm thankful that I was able to get into contact with them. But when I was there, like the rabbi said certain things to me that I then like checked in with them about. He said, "Oh, you would never be silenced here now. Like your view would be welcomed." And then I asked them and they were like, "No, no, 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 no. We're going to get fired from our Sunday school position. Like we won't be able to teach Hebrew school if if we are known to be organizing in solidarity." So like that is why I haven't pursued more shul appearances. Um, I think there's much more self-selection than there is blacklisting.
That's actually I hadn't really thought about that before. The way that if you, as someone who has something to offer to that community and are publicly anti-Zionist, are given a platform there that can be used as a way for them to pretend like they're doing more work in the community than they are. Yeah. Sarah, Tamim, do you have any examples or thoughts?
I mean, I also think that's super interesting. I I don't know the answer in terms of JBC specifically, but I do, as soon as we started this process, I sort of lost my appetite for getting any accolades from the Jewish Book Council, but I was like, no, I definitely won't, and that's okay. Um, so I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I don't know if it's only as a result of, our letter. I think, just in the sort of pattern of them moving right and digging in, like it is really wild that they haven't acknowledged that book, though.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for your question. Thank you for Der Spectre. It's a great platform. Lauren, it looked like you wanted to come and ask a question. You are welcome to if you would still like to.
Hi, my name is Lauren Zinn. I'm in Ann Arbor. Thank you so much for doing this. I really came in not knowing very much about what was going on. I've been Googling all of you while you've been talking, and I'm just like so grateful to hear from you. I guess my question is, I'm really interested in what you're going to be doing next and how I can get on your mailing list and be kept aware of it. Really grateful. I know how hard it is, and well, I don't know the way you know, but I can imagine. And just that you're doing this and being o open to all that I could even come and hear this story, and that Andy, you could moderate this, and I feel like this is something I could plug into with my um, with my um, solidarity with Palestinians and just not feeling like I belong or fit in anywhere and haven't for a long time. So, I'm seeing a door, I'm seeing an opening, and I'm really grateful. So I hope you'll give us a tip at the end how to stay involved.
Lauren, along those lines, when I was sort of like deep in the mess of sort of discovering what was happening at the Jewish Book Council and sort of this crisis of Jewish meaning, I stopped being able to write because I write Jewish stories and I didn't feel like I could write Jewish stories. And then as soon as I got involved in this group, like that feeling of a door opening, I started working on my third book, and it's been like wonderfully easy. I'm getting into sort of some of this like everyday Ashkenazi magic and some like cool magical realist stuff, and I just feel like creatively opened up. And so yeah, I think that's the goal, is for this to be um to create an explosion of imagination, both personal and political.
Thank you. Thank you
Interesting.
so much,
Yeah.
Lauren. That means a lot. Like I feel like for several years now, like ever, since the start of the genocide and before, there has been this feeling of like sort of little lighthouses in the dark. We're just, people beginning to find each other around solidarity and around, rage and hope and sort of dreaming of what comes next. And I think, I don't know if there's like, exactly, well, I don't know, Sarah, maybe you can speak to this more, but like whether or not there's an actual like email list or anything. Like I really think, continuing to collaborate with Andy and ACJ and like diaspora movement. Like I think it's really important and exciting that we sort of begin to connect our various constellations, as movements are already doing. But I think it's really exciting to, have this door start to open and be like, oh, who else should be in this room? Most of the people I know are novelists, fiction writers. Rachel brings poetry and like, other people are readers and artists and cover designers. And so I think it's really exciting to like the prospect of that growth is exciting.
Yep, agreed. And of course, we as authors, most of us also have day jobs, and my day job happens to be as a high school teacher. And it's been really heartening to connect like my union organizing in that space with my teaching pedagogy practice with this work of organizing. So you can tell I'm doing like a million different things at once, and my head will explode, but summer is in almost 3 weeks. So we're gonna make it. And the ways that that we constellate ourselves across different spaces is also how we can create, I think, connections across movement. So thank you, Lauren, for like your energy. I think the like Sarah coming in and joining us, I just felt this like burst of energy from you, Sarah, when you joined our email list. Like kind of weird to feel a burst of energy from an email, but it happened to me. When I got the first message from Sarah, I was like, whoa, like heck yes, like this is something. So the more that we can like combine those bursts and refuel each other along the way, um, the stronger that will be and the more sustainable that will be.
Conclude with, and I love ending on a high note and a charge for all of us to find those bursts of energy and to be those bursts of energy. But let's also answer Lauren's question. Is there a way for people who want to be more involved with this project to get involved? Is there someone they should reach out to? Is it one of you?
You can reach out to me. I'll just give my email. My full name, it's sarahyam@gmail.com. And you can just email me if you're interested. And I guess I'll start creating 2 email lists, an organizing email list and people to notify when we finally organize ourselves email list. Yeah. And we're also all writers with public presences, so you can follow us on social media.
Yes, and please remind us the titles of all of your books.
Unfinished Acts of Wild Creation.
Mine is called City of Laughter.
And mine is Dear Memphis.
Thank you. So go buy the books. Email Sarah if you want to get involved with this project. Do visit the ACJ webpage, acjna.org, and in the top right corner, there's a little button that says donate, and feel free to click it. Once you click it, you can do whatever you want, but at least click it. And next month, this space will be with Ariel Angel, reflecting on her 8 years as editor-in-chief of Jewish Currents. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Sarah and Rachel and Tamim. Thank you, Chinjuli, for organizing this, even though you couldn't be here, and I'm sorry you couldn't be here. There will be more opportunities. But thanks, everyone, and see you.